Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. We'll just have our own little party here.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's going good. How's it going on your end? I feel like this conference has been really good and also like a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's been a lot to handle, especially for Sarah being point on so many things. But she's taken it in stride and doing amazingly. So we're hoping for a strong finish today. And plenty of lessons learned over the last couple of days, and maybe we'll actually have a completely smooth day today.
I mean, my experience yesterday was smoother than my experience on Tuesday, so it feels like we're moving in the right direction.
That is good. I actually, unfortunately, had to abandon my team yesterday because I ended up with a migraine at noon, right as I was about to eat lunch. It hit me. And so I was like, sorry, folks, but I have to sign off. And then I went and took a bunch of meds and laid down for the next 3 hours. And the meds fended it off. I've got like a special migraine medicine. And so I avoided something really bad. Then I tried to come back down and be like, hey, do you guys need any help with anything? And they were like in the thick of it, just dealing with things, and my offer to help, I think, would have just added to the anxiety. So I was like, okay, I'm here just kind of hanging out in the background if anybody like needs anything. Otherwise, they were just getting it done.
Do you think your migraine was related to conference?
I hope not, because that wouldn't bode well for today. I actually don't know what caused it.
Yeah, maybe your meds will help you ride it out through the day.
Yeah. So I'm kind of on high alert for a possible recurrence here. Are we expecting Dave Jenkins? Should I let him in?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully I'll be good to go for the rest of the day.
Awesome.
How many people are we expecting? Good morning, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, how many presenters do you have this morning?
Just me.
Okay. Hey, we're already winning.
Yes, we have people in here 15 minutes before. Everyone is present. We're off to a good start. All right, so I'm going to make you co-host, Tyler.
Okay.
And that will give you all of the extra powers. Are you going to be doing any screen shares, Q&As, that kind of stuff that I'll need to assist with? Or are you all set?
I'll be doing a screen share and I'll be doing breakout groups. And so if you can just make me a co-host, I'll manage that.
Okay.
Unless, Robert, are you going to be with us the whole time?
I was not scheduled to be, but if you need me to be, I can be.
No, I can help you manage that stuff, Dave.
Great.
Okay. So you're both now co-hosts. You got all the access you need to. Do you need anything from me before I pop off?
I don't see breakout group button. You might have to make one of us a real host.
Okay.
Or maybe there's a button where you can extend us those.
I will make you the real host.
Okay, great. And it looks like it's still recording. So that's good. Hey, I've got breakout rooms. Great.
Excellent.
So Dave, you and I can make a plan for that. I don't know if you just want to randomly assign them or if you want me to choose certain people to be in them.
We're going to do random assignment and you can do groups of, well, let's see. I'll let you know the number once we have a sense of how many participants show up.
Okay, cool. I have experience doing that, so I can do it on the fly.
Oh, great. Thank you, Tyler. It'll most likely be 4 if you want to get set up. And then if there's some adjustment, I'll say that.
Okay, cool.
Group size 4.
Got it.
All right, I'm going to pop in some emergency numbers. That's one to you, Tyler, and then one for you, Dave, in case anything happens. Since there's 3 of us in here right now, you want to give a test run to the breakout group function. I know that's been an issue for some other folks.
Oh yeah, I'll practice that.
I'm getting the invitation. I'll join.
Dave, did you get a breakout room invitation?
Yep.
Great.
I'm gonna not now, but yeah,
All right. And then I just closed it.
awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem. It's nice to meet you. I'm excited to learn more about your organization and work.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited for this. This is a really new, well, the work has been happening for 10 years, but as an organization, it's new. So it's the first time that one of the staff is presenting publicly as resource organizing project. So it's kind of cool.
Cool. I honestly, I've been in a bunch of random things over the last 2 days, so I haven't done any research on you or anything.
Cool.
Great.
All right, that worked. I ended up in a breakout room by myself, and then
That's how I designed it.
Perfect. Then we're batting 100 then.
Quick question.
Okay. Yes.
Quick question, so if we, Tyler, if we need to communicate by chat, we can do that. If we direct message, that won't end up in the saved chat, right?
Right.
Got it.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, private message is always private.
And are we, I see we're recording, which is great. Do we need to get any kind of consent around recording, or have participants already given consent?
That's a great question. I think we're just recording all sessions except for sessions where speakers have explicitly requested that we not record, but we can just make a statement at the beginning and then say if people don't want their faces on the recording, they can turn their camera off. But that we are recording all sessions to be available for others to watch later, or for these people to watch later too.
Okay, cool. That works well for me.
Okay, I'm happy to do some of that housekeeping, and then I'll let you take it away, and anything I don't mention, feel free to chime in.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Robert, do you have other things you need to attend to?
Actually, no, but I will. It was actually a light morning since I don't actually have to moderate this. I just needed to start it off. But I think I may pop in maybe right around 9 and just see if everything is getting started smoothly. So I'm here if you need anything.
Okay. And I think, so maybe this is a question. I know us getting into here was a direct link, and I just went to it from the reminder email this morning. Are people who go through Excel events through the portal, is their experience just the same? Like they are finding it in the portal and then they're clicking it and then they're getting shot out to Zoom, or should we start a few minutes late anticipating that some people might be struggling to find the link?
So I think they started the precedent yesterday with the new links being put in the actual session description.
Okay.
And so hopefully people have learned kind of where to look for that. I'm checking the agenda now just to make sure that it is in today's description so that they'll be able to find it. Okay, so the Zoom session is there, password's there.
Great.
The one thing, the waiting room is currently enabled. I think the best way to do it is at 9 o'clock, just disable the waiting room rather than
keep dealing with people. That makes sense. Okay, great. I can do that.
That worked great for me when I had a Zoom conference on day 1.
Yeah, just let everybody in and then don't worry about it.
Admit all, then disable, and they can come and go as they please.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'll pop back in around 9 and just check that everything's running smoothly.
Great. Thanks, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go get a snack and use the bathroom, and I'll be right back.
Cool, Tyler, one heads up before you do that.
Yeah.
At least more than half of this, we're going to be working out of a Google slide deck, and people will have the link publicly. I just want to give you a heads up about that. So I'll share it when the time comes. I'll share it with you now privately so you have it open in case there's any troubleshooting. But
Cool.
but yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
then I can help you, like, if the chat gets bogged down, I can reshare it as well to make sure it's fresh for people who might be coming and going.
Yeah, that would be great. And so my screen share, I generally don't screen share when I'm facilitating virtual, but I will for the first like 3 or 4 slides while it's mostly talking and have people respond in the chat. And then once they start to go into small groups, we'll switch over to the slide deck where they can actually just write notes for themselves right into it.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right, people are arriving, but I'll wait to let them in until like a minute before, and then we'll go then.
Cool, that's perfect.
All right, I'll be right back.
I'm also going to take a quick bio break.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna let everybody in.
Fantastic.
Great. Good morning and welcome. Everybody can go ahead and mute themselves. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Good morning, Jess. And we will be recording this session. You'll hear me say this again when more people join. So if you're uncomfortable having your face or your name on the recording, you can just stop your camera or change your name. All of the conference sessions are being recorded for you or others to view at a later time. And Dave, do we want people to introduce themselves in the chat? Or do you have a plan for that?
Yeah, that'd be great. That is my plan.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. So
Hi,
go
would
ahead
you-
and use the chat box to put in your name, your pronouns, and whatever hat you're wearing today, so we know who we've got with us in the room.
let's yeah, actually, and that's great. And also, let's wait a couple minutes to do that because I think more people that come in won't be able to see it.
That's true.
Yeah, now. So let's give it a second. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you all for being right on time for this session at 9 a.m. We're going to give a few more folks time to just pop in and arrive. So if you have anything, if you didn't get a chance to grab your tea or whatever, now's a great time. We'll start up in just a minute. Welcome, welcome. Tyler, how much time do you think what do you think should be the start?
I lost my mute button for a second there. Anytime, I think it's up to you whenever you feel comfortable starting and people can join in.
Great. All right, we still got people popping in. Welcome. It's nice to see some familiar organizations. All right. And if you are able to rename so that your name, and also it's really helpful to have, this is going to be interactive. There's going to be some small groups. So it's also really helpful to have your pronouns in your rename if you don't already. If you're able to do that, that's fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Everybody saying hi in the chat. Thank you for opening the space. One of the things I miss most about in-person sessions is all the little, hey, how's it going? How have you been? That happens in the entrance and the exit. So yeah, definitely use the chat. Tyler, is there anything you want to say before we kick off?
Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Tyler Kidder. I'm a program officer with the Onion Foundation, and I'm one of the conference planners this year, and just here to support Dave as a moderator this morning. If you have any tech challenges or anything, just put them in the chat, or you can direct message me if you have any questions. And I'll repeat that we are recording this and all conference sessions so that you or others can watch them in the future. So you're welcome to have your camera on, but if for any reason you don't feel comfortable having your camera on due to recording or anything else, that's also fine. I think when we go into small group, we will be using a breakout function. So it might be nice to have your camera on at that point. It's up to you in the meantime. Yeah, so just using the chat to introduce yourself, and we're up to 20 participants. So I think we're ready to go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for the support. So welcome everyone. Good morning. My name's Dave Jenkins. I use the he series of pronouns. I'm going to facilitate this session on behalf of the Resource Organizing Project, which I'll share a little bit more about. I want to thank you for choosing the session and for diving in and all the work you're already doing around shifting how fundraising happens and what I'm calling in this session the just transition for fundraising. We're going to talk in this session. It's going to be interactive. There's going to be some stories I'm sharing about work that's happening around New England. There's going to be some context and framing that I'll share. There's going to be a breakout where you all get to share with each other and share back, like what are some of the things you're seeing. The kind of themes that we'll run through this hour are, one is sort of like movement building and organizing, and how we support sort of the front lines of movement building to address the big systemic problems, systemic oppression that our communities are facing and that our earth is facing. And also about how fundraising in the nonprofit sector has some really unique and substantial challenges, and particularly when it's fundraising for social, racial, economic, ecological justice work, and how it's time for a just transition in those fundraising culture and practices. So that's the general theme of what we're covering today. A little bit of background on me. And again, if folks, as I'm doing this little intro, if you want to go ahead and put your name and pronouns and your organization in the chat, that is wonderful. Thanks for folks that have already dived in with that. So my background, I grew up in Millinocket, and then have lived my adult life in the Boston area where I came for school. I became a community organizer, and for about a decade worked in community organizing for racial justice in Boston around issues in the local urban environment, in terms of environmental racism, and education, the education system and education justice, and a number of other sort of like addressing a number of other disparities in access to transportation, to land, to food, et cetera. And so that's sort of my background as a Millinocket kid. Obviously, having grown up in land that was settled by, I'm from a settler town in Penobscot territory, and then down here in Massachusetts in Ponkapoag land. So I just want to acknowledge that at the start. And so about 10 years ago, as I was in the middle of my time as a community organizer in Boston, and I was also a board member at Haymarket People's Fund, which some of you may know, I started a fundraiser in Boston. And the idea behind the fundraiser was twofold. One was that I could bring a little bit of my Maine identity down here. And so the fundraiser was a huge lobster picnic, and my friend's friend who caught the lobsters would bring them down, and et cetera. And the second idea was that a lot of the fundraising that we were doing was fundraising events were for individual single organizations, and there were a lot of labor and not a lot of, they were a lot of community building in some cases, but not always a ton of return in terms of the funds that were brought in for the work. And so the second idea was that we would make it for multiple organizations and try to build a cross-organizational collaborative fundraising project. When we first did that, it was called the Lobster Feed, because that's what my grandmother from Bangor used to call it when we would do it as a family. But when we first did it, we had just a couple orgs and we raised about $2,000. And 10 years later, as we've done it, we now have 10 orgs and we raise about $100,000. And what we've learned a lot along the way. And so as a community organizer, and then also as a what I call grassroots fundraiser, engaging individuals and people who want to invest in social movements and want to donate to social movements, and organizing those folks to be part of movements and to see their fundraising or their giving as part of the building power of social movements to address systemic inequities. With that being sort of my heart work on the side, I ended up co-founding with a number of grassroots fundraisers from the Boston area and also somewhat around New England, a new project in the last year called the Resource Organizing Project. And so I will share a little bit more about the Resource Organizing Project later in this session, but before I talk too much at this stage, I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of what we're doing. And so I'm going to screen share. For now, I'm going to screen share some slides that I have here, and Can somebody give you a thumbs up if you're seeing the welcome slide? Great. And in a minute, we will be actually all on the slide deck and engaging with it. So thank you for folks that have already shared your name and pronouns in the chat. That's great to see. Here's our goals and agenda for this session. So one of the goals is to introduce this new project that is doing work around New England to shift fundraising culture and practice, and including with some of the community organizing groups in Maine. We want to explore the idea of a just transition for fundraising and some of the shifts that are happening on the ground in movement spaces around how we resource movements. And we want to hear and share stories with each other about some of the fundraising practice shifts in fundraising culture and practices that you all are most excited about and that our project, the Resource Organizing Project, is participating in. We're in the welcome and intros. We're going to go into the just transition framing and then spend a good time in small groups, which I'm really excited about. And then we'll come back for sort of like a storytelling time and close out with what you want to see in the Maine landscape going forward. There's any, let's see, I'm just going to keep moving right through just because of time. One thing I want to find out, thank you for putting your names and pronouns and organizations in the chat. It's great to see sort of the mix of some familiar organizations and some groups I'm new to. And what I want you to do next is take a look at this slide for who's in the room. And I want you to read through and see which of these, so this is just for us to get a sense of like who's in this session so we can kind of tailor the conversation a little bit. Which of these letters apply to you, and then put all those letters in the chat. So you might be A and E and H, or something like that. So read through this and just put the letters that apply to you in the chat. It includes if you're a fundraiser in a couple different settings, if you're from a couple different foundation settings. Great. Awesome. That's really helpful. So I see a number of people. Jim does it all. Thank you, Jim. I see a number of people that are fundraising in what I would call a small shop, which I'm really excited to have you in here, and a number of people that are fundraising in larger shops. I think some of this will really resonate with you as well. Lots of folks that are donating to causes you care about, and lots of folks that are activists for causes you care about, whether that's through your work or otherwise. And a few folks that are staff at a foundation, public or family. A, E, G. Great. A, E, and G is the most popular one. So great. Okay, thank you for that. So that really helps me have a sense. Let's see. All right, so I just want to acknowledge that we're coming into this conversation with lots of different positionings. I see a raised hand. Nalita, do you want to just ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I don't see myself in this, maybe because finances is not my work. I'm in the public health department for the city of Portland. And so my salary is fully paid by the city. And I have one staff who is partially paid by the city, but the other, I have like 24 staff that is on per diem basis, and most of them I do fundraising for them. I apply for grants. So I was looking at this list and it just doesn't seem that any applicable those are to me, but maybe D, I'm not sure. I just wanted to be mindful before I answer.
Great, yeah, thank you.
It's a unique situation.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I didn't account for someone from government or from a public health department, but yeah, that makes sense. I think you'll find you'll find some of this to be really relevant, especially around the grant-based fundraising that you're doing to fund your staff. Great.
So
Thank
which will you see in the public health department in this position, the minority health program specifically under?
I wouldn't see it there. I mean, I would.
Yeah, okay, perfect. That's what I was thinking. Thank
But
you.
no, that's great, because I think this is just to get a sense of the distribution of folks in the room. So I'm really glad you chimed in.
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah. And so given that we bring to fundraising and really different roles and positions, we can see from that what we just did that there are folks in this space that have really different sort of positionalities, right? And this is just role is in our organizations or in sort of social change work is just one piece of the positionality. There's also the different layers of our identities and the different intersections of our identities. And so I'm excited about the conversation today to kind of bring out some of the things we're seeing across from the foundation side, from the government side, from the small fundraising shop side, from the activist side. So that's kind of the part that I'm most excited about. And so in terms of being grounded in that positionality, I would invite us all to just take a collective and shared breath together and just sort of ground in our intention for being in here and for really hearing each other from the positionalities that we bring into the space. So if you're willing with me, please just take one big kind of collective breath. Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to give a little bit of the framing for how at the Resource Organizing Project, we think about some of the challenges in fundraising and some of the need for a just transition in fundraising. And in a moment, I'll get a little bit more into what I mean by a just transition. So one of the basic assumption that we're starting from is that, and this comes from my time as a community organizer in movement spaces, the assumption we're starting with is that systemic oppression, particularly white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, settler colonialism, that systemic oppression is baked into the institutions and the dominant ideologies of our society. That's what people have been facing since the start and fighting back against, and what social movements today are, at least social movements oriented toward justice, are fighting against. The other assumption we make is that social movements where large numbers of people are engaged in demands for radical or transformative change, and where those demands are sustained over time, whether that's for racial justice, gender, economic justice, ecological justice, that social movements are necessary for systemic change, and that social movements respond to, social movements happen in the context of slow and persistent community organizing. So those are some of the assumptions that we bring to this conversation. Also, we know, and many of you are in sessions around this, and many of you are probably like, leading edge in the thinking around this, that the history of money in social movements and in progressive or social justice work often is a history where money and people with wealth are limiting the power of social movements to make transformation. That the power of wealth, whether that's and you may be in a number of discourses that I'll just reference here, but this is thinking about like the decolonizing philanthropy work, if you've read Edgar Villanueva, or the framing around the nonprofit industrial complex, where there's sort of like where all funding often creates the work instead of the people most impacted by the work deciding what the work will be. And there's a power paradigm in the history of funding social change and social justice work that has severely limited our ability to reshape the institutions and the ideologies that we need for a just world. So that's another assumption that we make. Another piece is that building strong organizations driven by people who are directly impacted by injustice is core to building people's power and changing systems. And that the nonprofit structure itself was designed for corporations. It's a tax code structure designed for corporations and then applied to nonprofits. And then social change groups end up within that sector with a number of structures and practices that weren't actually designed for making social change, but that social change groups have inherited as part of that structure. And oftentimes those practices and structures that come with being a nonprofit are limiting, and they limit the ability of groups, and they can be especially difficult and limiting for groups that are small. So for folks from small fundraising shops, if you feel isolated and like your work is impossible, that is structural. It's not you. There's no fault of yours. These structures that we have in the nonprofit system are especially difficult and present especially difficult barriers for social justice groups and for groups who want to address root causes, particularly because we have to find funding most of the time from systems that have wealth as a result of structural inequality. So this applies to fundraising, like this framework of, oppression exists everywhere. Social movements address oppression, are the way to shift systemic oppression. Money in movements has historically limited the power of social movements, and strong organizations led by people directly impacted are core to social movements, but the nonprofit structure often presents special barriers for those groups. That applies to fundraising in a major way. So the fundraising systems that work for some large nonprofit institutions, when I say large nonprofits, I'm reminded that we're in small nonprofits that are doing organizing or making social change work on a small scale with directly impacted people. Those are in the same sector as Harvard University or Maine Health, for example, huge nonprofits. And a lot of the systems in fundraising that work for a big museum, for example, can be really limited strategically for small nonprofits and small fundraising shops. So here I'm talking about things that everybody thinks is the right thing to do, like an annual appeal, or an annual gala, and things like that everybody says is, oh, well, that's like the first thing you should look at when you're building out a small nonprofit. And so that's why for us, fundraising is one of the pieces of movement work that often feels the most disempowering, isolated, competitive, and generally out of sync with the values we have about the world we want to create. Okay. That is my spiel. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce some shifts in in what I'm calling the just transition for fundraising. And I'm going to come out of screen share here. And I'm going to invite you into, first I'm going to share a slide deck with you. So if you can click the link that I just put in the chat, and I'll watch as people pop over onto this. You are editors in this deck, so you can change things in it, because there's going to be places where you're writing your own notes or responding to prompts in this slide deck. If anyone doesn't have access or can't access a Google slide deck, that's fine. Just send me or Tyler a chat, and what we'll do is when there's prompts, you can just prompt us and we'll put it in for you. I'm seeing 15, that's 20 people, 21 people over there. So we're getting pretty close. If anyone has a challenge getting on the slide deck, please just message Tyler. We do not want to leave you behind. So please just message. All right, and if you could start with me down on slide number 5, and feel free, nothing secret in this session. So if you want to poke around the slide deck, if you're curious, that is totally up to you. So when I talk about, if you can join me on slide 5, that's where we're gonna be for the next little section. So when I talk about a just transition for fundraising, I'm talking about a number of frames of transition that you've probably heard of in different places, or many of us talk about in different places. Each of these comes from different kind of discourses or conversations. For me, the from charity to solidarity was a frame that I first heard at Haymarket People's Fund, which was a foundation that was trying to invert the way that foundation decisions were made. They're a very early adopter of bottom-up decision-making in foundations. And so they would say, you know, change, not charity, or from solidarity, not charity. And that's a transition that historically in fundraising for nonprofit work and in philanthropy, charity has been the model that, oh, it's so generous that we will redistribute this money to these causes, right? And that doesn't, what that does is it recreates a power paradigm. It doesn't account for the fact that in many cases, the wealthiest foundations earned their money in ways that impoverished people and destroyed the earth. So there's all these challenges with that. The other pieces of a just transition, you know, from scarcity to abundance, you may have heard that. That's a really popular frame in social movement work these days. The idea that it's not that, oh, if you raise this money, somebody else doesn't get it. It's not a finite pie. There is enough for us to do the work that we need to do and to fund our organizations. And that's a framework that will shift the way we do things. And then other things about fundraising as a particular role in small nonprofits, from isolation to community, from feelings of competition to interdependence. And then also and this frame I take directly from the climate justice movement, from extraction to sustainability. And there's this idea there that where we want to move is towards sustainability in a number of ways. When we talk about extraction to sustainability, I'm not just talking about resources or our relationship to ecology and the environment. I'm also talking about the way that nonprofits extract labor from people who work in them to the point of exhaustion and burnout. In many, many, many cases, people in a nonprofit career will burn out. Many people in nonprofit careers will burn out multiple times through the course of that career. And that is a form of extraction that our system has set up. And that impacts fundraisers. So what does it mean to move towards sustainability for people in our organizations, sustainability for our organizations, sustainability for the larger social movements that our organizations contribute to and build, and sustainability in our relationships between each other and between our work and our environment, both human environment and natural environment. This, just as a note, this idea of a just transition, that term comes from the climate justice. I want to give credit, comes from the climate justice movement, specifically groups like the group Movement Generation coined it, and it's been popularized through the Climate Justice Alliance. So what we're going to do next is actually have time in small groups, and Tyler is going to set that up for us. We're going to be in a group of 4. And what I'm going to invite you to do is share with each other. There's too many people here to do a big out loud intro in the big group. So do an intro in the small group of your name and your your pronouns and your organization and your role. Make that brief. Like, please don't be the person who uses that as a moment to say all the things about you, to pitch your organization. And I'm asking you, and pitching your organization is important. That's not why I'm saying that. I want to make sure there's time in your small group for you to share with each other and answer to these questions. When you look at the just transition in fundraising, charity to solidarity, scarcity to abundance, et cetera, any of those, what are some of the shifts that you are actually trying to make in your work? What are you seeing in the field in other places and what are you most excited about, right? So there's going to be groups of 4, and you're going to have approximately 20 minutes in the small group to share and actually have a conversation about that. If you look at slides 6 through 10, those are what I call the chalkboard slide. And so each group, I would ask you to choose a chalkboard slide, put your names from your group in that slide, and then take some notes on what people are seeing. Because when we come back, you all will have the slide deck link and you'll be able to skim other people's notes and get and see some of the ideas and things that people are seeing and doing. Are there any questions before we move into breakouts to discuss this just transition in fundraising? Tyler, are you ready to set us up in groups of 4?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of groups of 4 and then there's just a few groups of 3, but I know you all can do it. You'll probably get a little pop-up that says enter breakout room. If you don't, look down at your bottom menu and you'll have maybe a little red indicator on a button you can click to access breakout rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and open rooms. And then you'll get a time warning, a little banner at the top when it's time to wind down. And then you'll have 60 seconds to fully wind down and come back into the big room. And Dave, it put you in a room. Feel free to go or not, your choice.
Thank you.
All right, here we go.
Tyler, how many rooms did we have?
7.
Okay, I'm gonna make a couple copies here.
Looks like everybody made it.
So let me change that. 5, 6. I think I need another cup of coffee.
It's amazing how complicated this can be.
Yeah.
And like draining.
Level of, can I gut check with you, Tyler? What was the level of clarity on that framing that I was sharing?
Well, I was also multitasking, guilty. So I thought it was pretty clear. And I think honestly, a lot of the people here are they already have some of this vocabulary.
Right.
So I think they'll ride right along. And then these small groups will iron out if there is any disparity, other people will catch up, I think.
Right. Great.
What time, I can send a message to everybody. What time do you want them to go till?
Let me check my agenda real quick.
Okay.
Let's see. I want to be back in, let me see. I had said 20 minutes, but I think I'd like to do, I want folks back by 9:50 at the latest. So if you could if you could hit the button at 9:49.
Mm-hmm.
You think 16 minutes is a good timing for this group in 4s?
Yeah, because some of them are in 3s and it'll feel like a long time for them. Although I did make sure that there was someone I knew in each of the 3s who would be vocal and tech savvy and could push it through.
Why don't you message folks that will come back at 9:48 and then you can do the close at 9:47.
Okay, great.
Oh, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like 25 or something.
Yeah, at one point it was 28. So I think, yeah, we're probably around like 26 participants.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. I will be right back.
Okay. I'm just popping into the different breakout rooms to make sure everything's happening.
Great. Yeah, notes haven't started, so I'll do the same. Oh, can I do the same?
Can you, well, here, I can assign you. So why don't you do room 4?
I can actually join. I have as a co-host, I can join any. Why don't I start at the end and you start at the beginning?
Great. I've done 1, so I'm going to go into 2 now.
All right, I'll start at 7.
Do you want to do room 5? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I've done 7 and 6, and they're doing fine.
Yeah,
I'll do.
I've done 1 through 4 and they're all doing fine.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, let me see. Let me see if we need it. Let me see. Sometimes I can tell by the slide deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're already in it. I think it would
Okay.
disrupt. Oh, and Samaz in there. So Samad knows my work, knows this work really well. That's great.
Yep, and Kara from Cobb's Cook is pretty up on things as well.
Oh, cool. Great. Yeah, I'm surprised there's not as many folks that I know. Just like I've worked, Samad and I co-facilitate tons of consulting projects together, but like Jake I know from MEHAF, but on that I just know orgs. Sarah Layton, actually, maybe I've met.
Yeah, she's newish in the last year to Sierra Club. She's a new ED there.
Cool.
Yeah, there's actually, so at Onion Foundation, we make grants to arts and environment, and I'm the environment program officer. And a bunch of these organizations, like Tony Pide is from Friends of Cobbossee Watershed, and there's some land trust people, Cobb's Cook Institute, Scudic, some Land in Common, some interesting environmental orgs represented, which is great to see, because I just really feel like there's such a nexus, but the environmental sector in Maine is really slow to adopt equity and justice stuff.
Yeah, yeah, everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, the environmental sector nationwide.
Yeah, I worked for 10 years in an environmental justice group in Boston. That was like part of when we, at that time, like it was like environmental justice was much clearer. It's like EJ organizations are like people of color led groups. We are separate from the big group.
Grassroots, right.
Now I think everybody's like, if you're doing environment work, you kind of call it environmental justice work. It's different, but yeah, no, I have a sense. I mean, I feel like the environmental sector is a little slow around that generally, but
it's so slow. And in Maine, so much of the environmental work happens at the land trusts. And those are just like the most colonial, NIMBY organizations. And they're all celebrating their 35th anniversary of preventing people from accessing land, you know? And it's really tied up in the way they identify as preservationist and conservationist is like an anti-Indigenous colonial vision of the world, and it's just very tangled. It's like
Yeah.
super tangly.
Yeah. It looks like a couple groups.
Aren't really moving along.
Yeah. Well, the last one, the seventh group, they were kind of doing more of just like a check-in and catch up, which is fine. The second group, it looks like, oh, they're starting to fill out. They're starting to put names in there now, so that's good.
I think they were just still really deep in the intros when I popped in.
Cool.
But it looks like maybe somebody's starting to lead on notes at least.
Yep, that's great.
I'll give them a 5-minute warning.
Perfect.
Does this session, is it 90 minutes?
No, it's 75.
75 minutes. Okay. So 10:15 ending time. Right.
Yep.
Are you participating in anything else in the conference today?
No, I wanted to do the whole conference, but I just got back yesterday from a 10-day vacation. And so
Oh.
it's been a scramble to do anything this week.
Yeah. I feel ya.
Tyler, there's work happening on my house, and I'm curious, like, how audible is the buzzing sound in the background?
The buzzing sound isn't, I mean, every once in a while I hear it, but it's not that bad.
Okay,
I
great.
hear you much clearer. I
Okay.
also hear your pup responding to the buzzing noises.
Yeah, she doesn't like the buzzing noises. Yeah.
I feel her. I feel her pain.
Exactly.
I was just thinking I probably should have paused recording.
I think you guys will edit it later, right?
I hope so. That is someone's job.
Especially because it has like the dead time in the opening.
In the beginning, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully. Maybe could you make a note of that with the Robert? Is it Robert?
It is Robert. Yep.
There's a breakout section in the middle that should get cut.
Yep.
If they are cutting the beginning. If not, it's not like it's a big deal.
No.
In fact, if not, hi everyone watching. We hope you are enjoying this. This part especially.
So where are you located now?
I live in Boston.
Oh, okay.
And I'm actually, my primary work is I'm a consultant with community organizing groups and funders who fund community in the community organizing sector.
Cool.
And half or more than half of my work's in Maine. Like I do a lot of work with Maine initiatives and some with MEHAF and a number of like some of the small groups. Like I've done some work with Portland Empowered or you know, some of the youth organizing groups, FAM up in Bangor. Yeah. Oh, now all this is on the recording as well.
It is. Everything.
Yeah. My mom is in Brewer, so I'm back and forth quite a bit.
Yep.
Where are you based?
I live in Winthrop between Lewiston and Augusta.
Cool.
And my husband's from Bangor. Well, his family's from the county. So a lot of them still live up there.
Yep.
So we're like halfway between all the people that we want to see in Portland and all the people that we want to see up in the Bangor way.
It's funny, since I moved out of Maine, like, you know, as a late teen, but my family's always been there, so I'm back and forth. some things are like sort of frozen in time. And so like when I hear Winthrop, of course now I will visit Winthrop for some work thing, but when I hear Winthrop is one of the places where you say it and I'm like, oh yeah, football and hockey games. Like,
That's
and
where you went to play.
I would go to play football or to watch hockey, watch our team or whatever.
Nice.
There's a lot of places around the state that like Gardner is another one. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't really know anything about Gardner, but I know I made the drive to watch hockey, to watch our hockey team or whatever.
I think it's like kid memories versus adult memories. Like your
Right.
kid brain latches onto certain things. And I just gave people a 2-minute warning.
I saw that. That's perfect.
I can push the button here in a couple of seconds and then they'll have 60 more seconds.
That's perfect.
But it's also funny because like Winthrop, like Gardner is on the way to nowhere. So like if you're just trying to go north on the highway or even on 202, you don't really go through it.
Right.
So you have to like make a trip to like get into the town or see any of the lakes.
Right.
All right, let's push the button. I'm going to close all rooms, so it should give them 60 seconds. Is this the only breakout room, or are we going to send them back out?
Only one. I mean, there's really only 25 minutes left. What we're going to do the rest of the time is I'm going to share a little bit more in depth about resource organizing project, and then
Great.
slide 17, they'll kind of choose like what are some of the examples where I feel like there's like major shifts happening. What are some of the examples, that they
Great.
want to know more about? Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Which group number were you all?
You went to room 2. I don't know, where were you taking next, Jesse?
Awesome.
I put it in 2 as well.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you. Take a minute to peruse the other chalkboards and just absorb some of the thinking from other small groups. I've been able to skim it as you were there and saw some really cool stuff.
Dave, we have a question from Lisa. Will the deck be available to us post-conference? I think the answer is yes. Are you
Yeah,
sharing everything?
You've got the link, so this deck will just stay up. So you're welcome to share it or access it. And it'll stay on. Anyone with the link can edit. You're welcome. Great. So, and because of that, you'll have more time to read through. And in this short session, what I want to get to next is to share a little bit of the stories from around New England with some of the innovative or different approaches to grassroots fundraising that are happening that really shift some of the paradigms. And so to do that, if you want to join me on slide 13, I'll start by just sharing a little bit of the chapbook from our resource organizing project. And the resource organizing project, I briefly mentioned some of the history behind it at the start. We're an organization that was started by a handful of grassroots fundraisers who are all connected to community organizing around New England. And we have, whoever just did that, can you press Control Z to, thank you. Yeah, you'll have the slide deck, so you don't need to copy things, and I can send you the link. If you could just, just unselect. Okay. So we are currently doing work or in relationship with about 25 different grassroots community organizing groups in the Boston area, in Western Mass and Rhode Island, and in Maine. There's a few groups that we have done a lot of the kind of advanced work with in Maine, are like the Southern Maine Worker Center, Portland Outright, ROSC, the Resources for Organizing Social Change, just as examples. And what we're doing, the way we talk about what we're doing, is we're trying to shift fundraising culture and fundraising practices in order to support movement partners to build stronger movements, right? And so we partner with groups to innovate fundraising strategies that help make that just transition in fundraising. That's what we do. And we've been doing that informally through a number of strategies for about 10 years, but as a formal project, we've been doing it now for just less than a year as a formal project. We're part of a group called the Movement Sustainability Commons, which is housed at Resist and the Center for Economic Democracy in Boston. And I'll share a little bit more about that later as well. If you jump with me to slide 14, our thinking as grassroots fundraisers who are deep in organizing movement building work is that in order to shift any aspect of our work, including fundraising, we need to lead with our values. And we need our fundraising values to be aligned with our movement values. And so you'll see on slide 14 some of the things that we've lifted up as what are the values we're seeing in the field in fundraising that are really kind of shifting some of the paradigms. Really a focus on sustainability, a focus on interdependence instead of competition between groups. It doesn't make sense that groups would collaborate on a coalition to close Long Creek, for example, and then fight together over donors. That makes no sense, and it actually hampers everyone. And I'm not saying those groups are doing that. They're not. There are some of the groups that are innovating that. Moving forward to slide 15, just an example of some of our approaches, some of the things we do and to make those shifts. A big one is shifting from solo organization events to collaborative events. And some of the thinking from this, just to be clear, a lot of the thinking around this project comes out of conversations at the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training, GIFT, who published the Grassroots Fundraising Journal for a long time. They dissolved recently, but a lot of the people involved in Resource Organizing Project have been trained by GIFT over the last couple decades. And so like there's some really great writing in the Grassroots Fundraising Journal about the power of multiple organization events and the power to build solidarity, the power of bringing donors and members and directly impacted folks together intentionally to celebrate work that's happening, to see ourselves as interconnected instead of in these very separated positionalities in relationship to social movement. And so we have a couple events. We do the Celebration of Grassroots Organizing in Boston, which I mentioned, which has 10 grassroots community organizing groups and raises about $100,000. And we also have some other creative games, like we have a big game night that benefits 7 different organizations at a time, and the memberships all come. And my favorite part of that is a giant poker tournament where if you win, then the proceeds go to the organization you've selected from the list that sort of meets the criteria. So, and there's this big long list. If you jump forward to slide 16, a big part of our approach is building community amongst fundraisers or amongst resource organizers within small shops. We just recognize that if you're in an organization where there's no staff that are fully fundraising, or where there's 1 or there's 1.5, that is a place in a lot of small nonprofits that feels the most intense and the most isolated. There's so much riding, and also you're not in the program work. And if you're like me, where I started out as an organizer and I was like, don't even talk to me about the money. I just want to do the work. The money is the part that's all caught up in the compromises and the this and the that, right? And there's so much of that in our organizations and our movement spaces that people in fundraising roles can feel really isolated. What we do is we connect them across organizations the same way that, 5 orgs working on a big parcel moving into a land trust, collaboratively working on that, the program people would work together on that for a year or two. But the fundraising people are usually isolated. So there's a couple specific strategies we do in that. One is we just have a monthly circle where people can drop in, and that's for the grassroots fundraising staff, specifically from community organizing groups and solidarity economy groups in some sense. And then we also do these 9-month cohorts where people build out a monthly donor program together across organization. They check in with each other, they, et cetera. And there's all kinds of ideas about why we focus on monthly donors as a strategy for central operating, which I saw someone mentioned in the notes on the slide, and as a strategy for sustainability. Jumping to slide 17, this is where I'm going to ask you to interact with the slide again, but I'll explain it. So this is a short session, just an hour plus, hour and 15 minutes. And there's lots of stories around New England of things that are actually happening. And what I want to do is invite you to prioritize some of the stories that I'll share with you. So that I put 5 things up here that are sort of like pre-populated topics. So one is I'd be happy to share more about the building of monthly donor programs in a circle, like those kind of cohorts we're doing, which I think other people could replicate. I'd be happy to share about the Movement Sustainability Commons that we're part of, which is framed as an off-ramp from the nonprofit industrial complex. It's a hub for fiscally sponsored and not fiscally sponsored groups to collectivize some of their administrative and back-end functions. There's a couple really cool self-directed shared funds that happened to respond to the COVID crisis. And I know there's some of those that happened. There's the People's Solidarity Fund or People's Emergency Fund in Maine, People's Solidarity Fund in New Hampshire that have happened in somewhat similar ways as well. That's really exciting. There's a couple examples, the Rhode Island Solidarity Fund and the Massachusetts Redistribution Fund that I'd be happy to share more about. That's where organizing groups themselves raised, in one case, a couple $100,000, another case about $1 million to redistribute COVID relief funds, where the groups themselves were making the decisions about the distribution and meeting the needs, and therefore able to direct funds to undocumented communities, able to direct funds to the places where there's the most need. And then there's also the collaborative events I mentioned. And another thing that came up in talking with the Maine philanthropy folks is talking a little bit about the ability to talk a little bit about what's funders' role in these kinds of structural shifts that organizations are trying to make. So what I'm going to ask you to do here is, if there's one of these you're really excited about hearing more about, what you do is you select a heart from the heart stack and drag it onto the bubble you want to hear more about. So I'll give you guys a second to drag some hearts onto the bubble where you want to hear a little bit more of a story. And we'll do it that way. It's kind of like choose your own adventure. Don't worry about reshaping your heart. It's fine if it got flattened a little bit. Some of the interactive most of my work is actually as a consultant working with community organizing groups and funders who are in the community organizing space. And as a facilitator, we've been working on how do we transfer in-person popular education techniques to virtual. And we've done it, and there's also limitations like resizing the hearts. It's totally fine, just gotta roll with it. Okay, so I'm seeing like a pretty broad distribution of stuff. So if anybody hasn't moved a heart, I'll give you another 30 seconds just to add another one on there. And it looks like I'll start with the Movement Sustainability Commons. And what I'll do here is actually just share a doc with you. That's a public doc. So the Movement Sustainability Commons is, let me share this in the chat. So this is a view-only doc that is the description of what the Movement Sustainability Commons is. This is a project of Resist Foundation in Boston, as well as the Center for Economic Democracy. And for a couple years, they worked with partners to think about what are some of the systemic challenges in running a small nonprofit with people, for some of these nonprofits that are doing sort of innovative, visionary, or social justice, really tough work, and are often limited by the administrative burdens of being a nonprofit. For a lot of groups, the right decision is to be fiscally sponsored and not manage that. But one of the challenges with the fiscal sponsored thing is that if you're a nonprofit that's not set up intentionally to do that, it can become very burdensome. And also, some of the larger entities that can fiscally sponsor groups on the left or in social movement may not be values aligned. And so one of the ideas around this was, how can we create a fiscal sponsorship hub that allows small nonprofits to collectivize some of the administrative functions in a way that is values aligned and is affordable, and where it can also then seed creative projects. And so the resource organizing project that I'm sharing with you today is one of the programs of this hub that is sort of seeded within this larger entity, the Movement Sustainability Commons, as well as we're launching a bookkeepers cooperative, a cooperative that like trains folks coming out of organizations to do the bookkeeping role, and then is a worker-owned cooperative in order to, because for a lot of groups, the bookkeeping, you might not have enough for a whole bookkeeping staff person, and you might want to contract that out, but that can be actually really difficult. So the idea here is, after listening to a lot of partners, like, what would it mean if we had a values aligned worker cooperative that did bookkeeping and could actually build that? So that's like one of the movement interventions that we're seeding through the Movement Sustainability Commons. So those are some examples. I'd love to see if there's any questions about this, or you could come off mute or put them in the chat. I see a number of people had clicked over. The current offerings: fiscal sponsorship, resource organizing project, the bookkeepers cooperative. We're also looking into like, how do we have more shared spaces in order to prevent sort of the displacement of small organizations, as in the housing market. And the
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm Jess, and when you say we, who is we? This is so much. This is so much work and so many, so much impact.
Yeah,
we.
The we for the Movement Sustainability Commons is, it was started by staff of Resist Foundation and the Center for Economic Democracy. And staff from those two organizations have formed the initial workers collective that is building the Movement Sustainability Commons as a project of those two organizations' work. And then there is also a governance structure, a general circle that's made up of, like, I'm a member of that. It's almost like a board, but it's not a board. And there's a lot of room for sort of semi-autonomous development of projects that are values aligned. And so when I say the we, I also am referring to, like, me. I'm building one of the semi-autonomous values aligned projects with several other people through the resource organizing project, as an example. Does that answer your question? And over time, Movement Sustainability Commons will have its own, and already does have some of its own part-time staffing that work on different projects, as it can be self-sustaining.
I guess, sorry, as a follow-up question,
Yeah.
Is there a legal structure? Are you a nonprofit? Do you
Currently functions. Yeah, it currently functions under Resist as a nonprofit. So it's currently itself a fiscally sponsored. That won't be the long run, but the build out of the infrastructure of this is under a foundation. Yep. Any other questions about Movement Sustainability Commons? This is exciting to share with folks in Maine. I have dreams of something like this in Maine. Who wants to work on it? Raise your hand. Yeah, Jess, Savannah. Let me jump back to another storytelling. So there's four hearts on the Sustainer Learning Circles. So let me tell you a little bit about that. And actually I will drop another link as I do. Is that okay? Is that useful for you to have like the one pagers? Great, okay. That one I might have to find. So what the Sustainer Learning Circle is this comes out of knowing that monthly donors, I would say for like at least a couple decades, there's been thinking about the power of monthly donors as a sustainability strategy for small nonprofits. The thing is, 20 years ago, the technology to do that was very cumbersome. And today it is not cumbersome at all, right? I mean, if you look at almost every big political campaign has huge monthly recurring donation infrastructure. There's plethora of platforms that you can use from, you know, all the old school ones like Network for Good have all updated and integrated really easy, accessible monthly donor stuff, as well as all the new ones, the Act Blues and the, you know, Donors Choose and Donor Box and everything. And the idea behind that is that for small organizations, attracting and keeping one-time donors is a tremendous amount of labor. And oftentimes that labor doesn't actually meet the capacity and energy that the donations sometimes don't meet the capacity and energy that it takes to do that, especially with small donors. And we know that to be values aligned, we can't just be talking to the donors that are major donors, however we define that, because then we're more responsive to, and we're funded and sort of that we're just recreating the sort of power dynamic with foundations. It's just that instead we're doing it with folks who are giving us 1,000 or 5,000, 10,000 or 20,000, you know, separate from a foundation. So we know that having lots of small dollar supporters, it makes our organizations more powerful and more sustainable. But to do that in one-off donations is extremely cumbersome. And actually, when you shift to monthly donations, a lot of things happen. One is people end up giving to you and keeping a relationship with you for longer. The average monthly donor across nonprofits gives for at least 19 months. And I think in the more smaller and personal organizations, it's much longer than that. They actually give more when people are giving monthly, because for a lot of small donors, the size of your gift at any time is based on your liquidity and your budget, right? And so your amount of money in your budget, actually you might be comfortable giving, like if I feel like, oh, I can give $20 this month, I actually might be pretty comfortable giving you $20 every month, but you definitely can't ask me for a one-time donation every month. Like that would start to really strain our relationship. So monthly donors end up giving more. And then the most important thing for us is, well, two other pieces. That money is all unrestricted. So like at one organization where I was on the board, we were like 90% grant funded plus a major donor. And we built it was an undocumented youth-led group in Massachusetts that's been around for about 14 years and since 2006. And at the start of the Trump administration, just before that, we had kicked off a monthly donor program. And then we said, look at all this white supremacist, xenophobic rhetoric coming from the political campaign at the time. We need people to stand with undocumented young people for the long haul. And so sign up to be a dream sustainer of our organization. The organization is called the Student Immigrant Movement. And what we did was we built a group of 160 people that were giving anywhere from $5 to $100 a month. And all of a sudden, 30% of our money was central operating and continuing and not from foundations. And so we got to expand our organizing capacity through the 4 years to fight back against the Trump administration and to do a number of like new projects so the idea here is that central operating, and then lastly, people who give monthly are in a deeper relationship. And so that's the logic behind the Sustainer Learning Circle. And the other piece of it is that a lot of groups know this, but have inertia with their past practices and can't make the switch. It's so hard to like stop doing your annual appeal and instead start to like make some calls and get people signed up as monthly donors. It's really hard to do that. And so what we do is we build community where 4 or 5 organizations are together doing that and learning about sustainers, building a plan, checking in with each other, getting support from a facilitator. Myself and one of the fundraisers at Southern Maine Worker Center are currently facilitating a circle that has a couple main groups in it. And then we also use a matching fund from foundations to match and incentivize people's participation in making the switch. So that's the idea of the Sustainer Learning Circle, and I'll drop a description in the thing. And Nalita has a question, and then we're gonna move on to the last thing. Nalita?
Thank you, Dave. I'm just wondering, I like the idea of the monthly donations. However, and I know you mentioned that you didn't think about on a governmental entity. So again, coming from my office, I'm thinking about all the paperwork that I will have to do for the city of Portland, because we have a requirement, you know, in order to get a grant or any funding, I have to go for the process of pre-approval and goes to different departments, that's even the city manager. And then, I'm sorry, and then the other piece is the reporting piece. How difficult is, or how is the process for the reporting, because that takes also time. Those 2 questions that I have for you. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for how that would fit with a public entity like the Portland Public Health Department. In fact, I kind of don't think it does. I think you guys are in a different, as a public and government entity, are kind of in a different funding model than the groups that we're working with. That's my honest answer. So
thank you.
Great. So what I want to do before we close is invite you to slides 18 and 19. And I just want to ask, you know, what are you, in terms of these types of interventions in making the just transition for fundraising for the small kind of movement-oriented nonprofits, what are some of the things that you would like to see in Maine? You know, what are some of the projects, ways to be collaborative, interdependent, et cetera, that you would like to see in Maine, or that you'd like to experiment with in your work? So take a second on slide 18 or 19 to sort of drop in, even if it's an unformed or partially formed idea. What of this conversation would you like to see grow or nurtured in Maine? Great. So I'm seeing collaboration among nonprofits on campaigns and sharing revenue. Awesome. Cross-sector silo conversations on shared values and vision in our community. I think that's great. more collaboration, more collaborative events, grassroots fundraisers meeting together, transforming how resources move through our sector, focus on long-term relationship with an emphasis on solidarity, deeper reflection on who is our fundraising audience, and how to center equity. Moving from isolation to community, focusing on our state as a whole. Consolidation of nonprofits with similar missions, capping growth. Mixed small group of funders and fundees looking at possibilities together. Smart. Larger conversation about what abundance looks like. Great. And with that, I want to honor your time and obviously this is just a kind of a teaser and a lot more of me speaking than usually when I'm facilitating dialogues with folks. But you know, in the hour and 15 minutes we have, I want to thank you for sort of coming along in this conversation and sharing your thoughts. And I'd welcome anybody who wants to follow up. I'll put my email in the chat. And you're welcome to continue to access and share the slide deck so that you have notes from the presentation. And thank you. Thanks for being part of this and for being part of this transition.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if anybody wants to ask anything else specific.
Actually, Dave, I have a question. Do you have a relationship with the Maine-based group Resources Organizing for Social Change?
Yeah, I do. They are like really active participants in the Resource Organizing Project. They're both SAS and SET who work there are participate in our grassroots fundraiser circle, as well as their current group in the Sustainer Learning Circle building a Sustainer program. So yeah, that's one of the three main groups where we sort of started with relationships. Them, Portland Outright, and that is sort of brokered through, because I have a relationship with them as a consultant through NEHAF. And then the Southern Maine Worker Center is also doing a lot of really cool stuff in this area. And one of their grassroots fundraisers, Nicole Manganelli, is sort of a lead thinker with us around the Resource Organizing Project. Yeah. And ROSC, I saw that during the Movement Sustainability Commons where I was sharing about that, I saw someone put in like, is this similar or different to ROSC? I think there's really exciting similarities, and my hope is to have like really deep partnership with ROSC. I think the challenge with ROSC is like, we got to get ROSC resourced, like really actually resourced. Because honestly, the function that it is holding down in the Maine landscape versus the amount of resources committed to what it's holding down is not equitable, just to be frank, from my view, which I'm sure you agree with.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for your presentation. Really cool. Amazing work. Amazing.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jess. Thanks for being part of this. Yeah. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to follow up.
I hope so. Yeah, I wrote your email down. So yeah, you'll hear from me. Thanks,
Dave.
Tyler.
Nice to see you, Jess. I have to
Thanks.
end this and go moderate another one of the sector roundtables. So maybe I'll see you later, Jess.
Yeah, I
Nice
hope
to meet
so.
you, Dave.
Bye.
Tyler, thank you so much. Take
You're
care.
welcome. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.